Hello class, my name is Andrew Magnuson. I'm hoping you're doing well. I will be this week's presenter. This is week 6 of the class, and this week's subject is British political parties, so I hope you enjoy the presentation. Alright, let's begin. When discussing the political parties in Britain, one of the first things you're going to notice is that it is primarily dominated by 3 different parties. The graphic to my right is a color-coded representation of the House of Commons. The red squares represent the Conservative Party, the blue squares represent the New Labour Party, and the gold squares represent the Liberal Democrat Party. As you can see, if you look to the top right of that graphic, there are some other colors that do represent other parties. However, the big 3 definitely hold the overwhelming majority of power and control over the House of Commons. As it currently sits, they have 616 out of 660 seats in the lower house. Before I talk about the individual parties and their beliefs and ideologies, I wanted to kind of give you a overall feel of the historical trend of the political parties in Britain. The graph is a representation of the share of votes received in general elections from 1832 up until the current time. The blue represents the Conservative Party, red represents the New Labour Party, yellow represents the Liberal Democrat Party, and the little patches of gray represent the other parties. As you can see, the Conservative Party seems to remain fairly consistent as far as membership and share of votes, whereas the Liberal Democratic Party, which started off huge in the beginning of 1832, kind of dipped a little and stayed relatively stable up until 1900, when the New Labour Party was founded and emerged and began stealing their votes. One of the things that kind of struck me is usually when a third party comes into the mix of a political system that's dominated by 2 parties is that it'll take votes away from both parties. Whereas this one, when the New Labour Party came in, it only took part. It seemed to only really affect the Liberal Democratic Party, and it took away just massive amounts of votes from them and made the Liberal Democratic Party the smallest of the big 3 parties. One of the things, the reason why, if you're wondering why that is, and we'll discuss it later, is because the Liberal Democrat parties as well and the New Labour Party are very similar in ideologies and beliefs. The first party I want to talk about is the Conservatives. This party was founded in 1834. Their current leader, as well as Prime Minister, is David Cameron, and he's been the Prime Minister since 2010. As far as the political spectrum goes, they're definitely right of the center. They're currently the largest political party in Britain. Their House of Commons membership is 304 out of 660 seats, so roughly a little over 46%. Below are 3 notable members of the Conservative Party. We've already discussed our current Prime Minister, David Cameron. The lady in the center is, of course, Margaret Thatcher. Some of you might have known her as the Iron Lady. She was the Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990, and the gentleman on her right is Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister during World War II from 1940 to 1945. One of the things that stuck out to me is when we think British politics, usually the first 2 names that come to people's mind are Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher. So having the 2 biggest names in British political history from your party definitely, I think, says a lot about the relevance of the party, since they have both Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill were members as well as leaders of the Conservative Party. As far as the conservative political views and ideologies, They are a right-wing political party. They're also known as traditionalists. They promote the preservation of traditional social institutions, and basically what that means is if they kind of have the attitude of if it's not broke, don't fix it. They strongly support the members of the military. They generally align their foreign policy stances with the stances the United States takes. Fiscally speaking, they definitely are conservative. They believe in Adam Smith's invisible hand and the laissez-faire, and they support the free market. They believe in a limited government, and they think the government should basically stay out of the private sector. And so less regulation, more freedom in the private sector. This party is very similar to the Republican Party, in my opinion, for a number of reasons. I think the most obvious one is financial. The Republicans also support a free market system. They want less government regulation, and that's aligned with the conservatives, as well as their strong support of military, which is also a very important value to the Republican Party. And also, they're kind of reluctant. I don't want to say reluctance to change, but they want they want to preserve the old values and morals and beliefs and traditional social institutions. So that's why the conservatives reminded me of the United States Republican Party. The next group I want to discuss, the next political party, is the Labor Party. The Labor Party was founded in 1900. Its current leader is Ed Miliband. He is a member of Parliament and the leader of the opposition, and has been since 2010. On the political spectrum, they are definitely left of center. They are currently the second largest political party in Britain. They have 257 out of the 660 members of Parliament, members of House of Commons, which is roughly 38.94%. Below are three notable Labor Party members. To the bottom left, Ed Miliband. We've already talked about him and how he's the leader of the opposition. The man in the center is probably their most famous and most notable figure, and that's Tony Blair. He was the Prime Minister from 1997 and 2007. As we've talked about earlier in the class, he was very close to George W. Bush. When George W. Bush was president of the United States and Tony Blair was the prime minister, they were inseparable by a lot of accounts, and I find that kind of find that a little bit ironic, because the Labor Party is definitely left on the political spectrum, while George W. Bush, as most of you remember, was a very right-wing conservative. So just the fact that they got along so well and were so in line with each other really kind of stuck out to me. But the gentleman on your right is Gordon Brown, and he was the most recent prime minister that came out of the Labor Party, and he was the prime minister from 2007 to 2010. As far as their political beliefs and ideologies go, the Labor Party is definitely left-wing. They strongly support workers' rights, and they're huge on their social liberties. They have a far more progressive stance on legislation, and they're more willing to turn away from traditional values and more open to change. Fiscally, they are very liberal. They believe in the redistribution of wealth, big into welfare systems, heavy taxation, and just massive public spending. And this is, in my opinion, it's kind of similar to the Democratic Party. Because of their tendency to tax heavy and the massive public spending and the redistribution of wealth. And that's not a knock on the Democratic Party. I know it might sound a little biased, but they're definitely, I think those are some of the obvious similarities. And that being said, the other similarities are their emphasis on social liberties and supporting of the workers' rights. I have the feeling that the Labor Party is very supportive of the unions. which is a Democratic stance as well. The last party I really want to talk about is the Liberal Democrats. They were founded in 1988 when the Liberal Party and Social Democratic Party merged. Their current leader is Nick Clegg. He is the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK from 2010 to the present. Politically, they were kind of hard to read. They're conservative on some issues. They're liberal on some issues. So I'd say overall, I guess if you had to say where they were on the political spectrum, I would say center to slightly center left. They're the smallest member of the big three, or if you want to spin it positively, they're the third largest political party in Britain. They currently hold 55 out of the 660 seats, which is roughly 8.5% of the House of Commons. And I really couldn't find notable members of the Liberal Democrats because they're so young. So for the three pictures, those pictures are from the Liberal Party, and they were the most recent prime ministers from a party that isn't the Conservatives or the Labour Party. And those gentlemen are David Lloyd George. He's to your left. He was the prime minister from 1916 to 1922. Herbert Henry Asquith was the prime minister from 1908 to 1916, and he's pictured in the center. And the gentleman to your right is Sir Henry Campbell Bannerman. He was the prime minister from 1905 to 1908. And like I said, they are the three most recent prime ministers from the Liberal Party. And as you can tell by the dates, they were also consecutive. Since then, there has not been a prime minister from that party. Politically speaking, this was a very difficult party to really read. They're definitely a mix between left wing and right wing. They believe in a free market, but they also support welfare systems. They are open to constitutional reform, but they're not really crazy about it. But they definitely believe in constitutional reform. They support civil liberties, which is a similarity to the Labour Party. Fiscally, they're definitely more liberal. They're very similar to the Labour Party because they believe in the heavy taxation, redistribution of wealth, and those things. However, one of the things they kind of side with the Conservatives on is they believe in reducing the role of government in the private sector. So, this is definitely the hardest group to get a feel on. They're left on some issues, they're right on some issues, but overall, kind of in the center. They're definitely, I wouldn't say a confused party, but they're definitely in the middle. On this slide is a list of the other parties as well as their logos. The other parties that are represented in the lower house. The Democratic Unionist Party has 8 members. The Scottish Nationalist Party, 6. Sinn Féin, 5. Plaid, Cymru, 3. The Scottish Democratic and Labour Party has 3. There are 5 registered independents in the lower house, and the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, as well as the Green Party of England and Wales, and the Respect Party each have 1 member in the lower house. And that pretty much wraps it up. I thank you for watching. This week's question of the week is going to be, how do British political parties compare and contrast to the political parties of the United States? I know if you've paid attention to the presentation, I've already kind of given you my thoughts on that, but please feel free to research the different political parties, and I want to get your opinion on how they relate to both the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, maybe the Libertarian Party, and just how, just their similarities and differences.